This is the When Work Isn't Work podcast. This podcast exists to help people reignite the love of what they do in a post-pandemic world. The pandemic gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reflect on what is truly important to us in work and in life. I'm your host, Sinead Connolly, co-founder and director of Lotus People, an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency. We hope you enjoy today's chat. To support awareness around Mental Health Month for October in Australia, we introduce you to our mini-series around mental health. And we are live. The instant panic. Laura, welcome back.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me again.
Oh,
it's nice that people want to listen to us again.
It really is. And I tell you what, the episode number one of the first season, our first ever episode was with you, and it was the most downloaded episode that we've ever had. So there is a demand for you in your brain, which I've known for about kind of 15 years, but it's nice for
the hard
everyone else
to live up to coming back on it. Like, this could be terrible.
It could well be. It's unlikely, but we'll give it a go. So look, season one of the podcast, the When Work Isn't Work podcast has ended. We did an awesome little 10 episode season, speaking to so many incredible people. What we wanted to do, and why we're speaking today, is we really wanted to look at Mental Health Month in October, and we always do something around mental health awareness. And we just thought we'd use the podcast as a platform to sort of open up these conversations. We're having conversations with a psychologist, we're having conversations with the team and how they manage success versus mental health. And I know there's quite a few topics that you and I want to cover. But I guess the reason that we wanted to do it is kind of just create this mini series where we do get to speak about something that's very close to my heart. I know it's close to your heart as well. So thank you genuinely for joining us. This is a topic that even as I was sort of researching and figuring out and I know we were speaking about which angles to take, it just feels like an hour is never enough. I feel like maybe this is me pretending to carve my pathway as a psychologist in my future career rather than being a recruitment business owner, but we'll see.
It's heading that way.
We'll watch this space, report back in 5 years, we'll see where I'm up to.
Yeah.
So there are many different angles that I want to take and that we kind of can go with it, but I did think that I would start by reading out a quote that you sent me yesterday you obviously sent it to me for a reason. It really resonated with both of us. It's by Dr. Adam Grant, and he says, "Burnout isn't due to a lack of motivation. It's caused by a shortage of capacity. There are more interesting people and projects than hours in the day. The question isn't whether you have interest, it's whether you have bandwidth. Enthusiasm is boundless, time is finite."
No, I saw it and I was like, who does this resonate with? My best friend.
I was literally about to say, why did you send me that, Laura?
The queen of I would like to do everything and I have limited time, which things can I actually do? But it's hard, right? Because when you have a mindset where like there's a world of opportunity, like that's an amazing mindset to be in, but it can also be an exhausting mindset, because then there's no limit to what you can explore, but then also at what point do you set a limit?
Yeah,
you know,
100%. And it's just been something that I've struggled with so much over the years. And I remember we've sat in strategy sessions where I've said, I want to do this and I want to do this and I want to do this. And you've literally had to say to me, no, you can't do all of it. But what I have mistaken for sort of where the energy sort of time constraint comes in, I have basically come at it from the angle of, but I can do it and I'm interested in doing it and I'm drawn to it. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you can fit it all in. I went to a talk the other day, which was with a neuroscientist, and she said, she was talking about this exact topic, but the fact that energy is currency. And how, as individuals, how we spend our energy, how we spend our time is naturally one of the most important considerations and factors that we'll ever that we'll ever kind of think about. And what she said was, she referred to energy used within the term energy credits. And she said, you have only a certain amount of energy credits in a day. And you could work, for example, a 12-hour day, but if you're not doing really intense cognitive, energetic work, you can work 12-hour days and be completely fine. But if you work an 8-hour day, and everything you're doing within that day is draining you from a cognitive perspective, from an energy perspective, then you're going to live your life edging towards burnout. And she said that from a research and scientific academic perspective, it's been proven that you can only do 6 hours of heavy cognitive work in a day without tipping into a place where you're deplenishing, you're depleting, you're no longer in a kind of surplus place. And I just thought that is so fascinating, because I don't think it's something that we really consider. We just book things in, we kind of approach our days and we just power through. But it's an interesting take on it, isn't it?
A really interesting take on it. And I think, you know, we are conditioned within this kind of 9-10 hour working day. And that used to be a 7-8 hour working day. That's now like a 9-10 hour working day. And then we're like, we've got to maximize on that, like in, you know, in every way, shape or form. Like, I still have this energy around my working day. Like, from the moment I sit at my desk in the morning to the moment I decide to finish, I need to be completely efficient in every single one of those moments. And it's like, over 9-10 hours, that's complete madness to think that you would be able to hold a level of concentration for that long. You'd be able to hold the level of productivity. But there is, I think, a level of conditioning that comes into that. And then if you are, you know, either a driver or type A personality, you have that natural tendency to push anyway. And so it can be a dangerous place to be when it's, you know, when you set that high level of expectation for yourself, I think. And that energy credit, because I actually have a client and a good friend who I think went to that same talk, or maybe did it on a different day, or might have been at the same one, but that for different people, different tasks also deplete certain people more. And so I could do something for 3 or 4 hours and still have 2 hours in the bank, whereas you might do the same task, but because of your makeup, that's you done for the day. And I think we don't take that into account either, do we? It's like the, you know, how different we all work in that sense, and the need to, I guess, honor that as well around what we need to balance that out.
And you're right, it was the same talk, and that's exactly right. It's and I think it's so funny, isn't it? Because even like, I'm 7 years into running Lotus, and I just feel like it's this container constantly in self-discovery and personal optimization. It's like, how 7 years
I do more
business. How can I do more? But also, how don't I know how to run my best week? How don't I have the ability to put really strong boundaries in place? How don't I
you say that,
know the things that drain me?
Look at like now compared to how we used to work 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
that
if you
true.
think about that, like 7 years ago, and maybe that was an age thing as well, because we're in our mid to late 20s, and probably, but like, we worked ourselves to the bone then at the expense of everything. And I think now we wouldn't do that to ourselves. Yeah. And naturally, taking care of yourself from a mental and physical perspective does take up more time in the day. Like, if you want to meditate, exercise, eat well, connect with people outside of work, you know, you need 4 hours in your day to do that stuff without, you know, it being on a schedule. Whereas if you just dedicate your life to the moments that you're at your desk, well, yeah, you can work a 10-hour day because you're not doing anything else around that. And I think in our 20s, we were willing to sacrifice a lot more of that stuff, or shoehorn it in when we could. Whereas now we don't sacrifice that stuff. Like, that stuff now is the stuff that comes first, and work comes afterwards. So we probably do have less hours in our day.
Yeah, no, that is such a good point. And I'm laughing at you with your morning routine between your meditation, your gym, playing with the bunny rabbit. Like it does
3
take you
hours.
about 4 hours before you get to your desk, which is why we're lucky we live in Australia and get up time is about 6 a.m.
Yeah, and I don't start work until like 9:30. But I couldn't work how I used to. So I think even that is a progression in itself of like, because you say, well, like, why haven't I learned to fully? But I think we've just learned to find more balance.
Yeah. Do you know what's really interesting as you say that? And I will literally use this morning as a perfect example, is I think there's also a lot of conditioning that comes with that. And there's also potential sort of, I guess, questions of what are our drivers? Are we, you know, that classic question of, are we driven by insecurity? Are we driven by, like, where does our ambition come from as a collective, as a species? And I feel like there are a lot of things to unpack with really getting to that place where you are okay to spend the time and structuring the day that you need and listening to your body in that way. And this morning is a perfect example. I have had a low energy week and I woke up this morning and I do need to be in the city, even though it's not my usual work in the city day. I had a few things in the city today. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go at my own pace this morning. So I woke up 6:30, it was hardly a lie-in, went to the gym, but just really, it is for me, correct. Really needed to go at my own pace. I just didn't watch how long I was in the gym for, didn't watch the time as I was making breakfast. I was chatting to my mum who's over at the moment. And I got into work at 9 a.m. and I needed that morning. I needed and I opted out of a team meeting or like morning huddle, which again, I didn't need to be in. But I then was battling with, I'm not in that meeting. What does it mean that I haven't shown up to the meeting? Do I need to be in those meetings anymore? But what does it look like if I'm not? Am I skiving? I get to my desk at 9 a.m. Oh, sorry, I'm at my desk at 9 a.m. And it's like, I am the biggest advocate for flexibility, progressive working, the new world of working, the new age of working. Like, I could not be more in support of that for other people.
Yeah,
but
totally.
for myself,
one thing spreading the word with it, isn't it? Like, you know, we often talk about like working smarter, not working longer hours, but like, it's very easy to say all of that stuff and still be in the conditioning of. And I do think part of that as well is that led to, or not led to, but we still link that energy with being really successful in our 20s. So that's hard to break, isn't it? It's like, if I don't have those same habits or urgency anymore, will I not have the same level of success I experienced? It's like, no, you're just going to work differently. Like, you'll be more objective. You'll have more space for ideas. Like, in the role that you're in now, more space and time is actually better. But it's I think linking what used to work for us, or what we perceived was the best way of doing things, and going, well, that led to success, therefore I should continue doing that.
And in that time, I prepared for this podcast. I had my nervous system was completely calm because I wasn't rushing around. I prepared for this podcast. I took a call from the CEO of our charity partner to talk about the sleep out that we're all doing with our charity partner on Friday. And it was a really good call. And I did a few other bits at my desk that I just needed to do. And like, I wouldn't have, that would be a very different energy. So that you're right, creating spaces is really important. And it's funny how you say the success of our 20s, if I'm not mirroring that or working with the same sort of intensity, like, what does that mean? But then also, what was the counter of that? From a mental health perspective, my nervous system was shot. I had chronic fatigue syndrome. I had adrenal burnout. I ran myself into the ground. You weren't having the time of your life either from an energy perspective. Like,
absolutely not. Nearly, literally nearly had a nervous breakdown, like at 29, like literally hit the limit of what I could do. Like, but we forget that, don't we? When it's 8 o'clock in the morning, you're in the gym and you're like, well, this feels a bit late. I feel like I'm being naughty. Who am I reporting into? I don't know. I'm running my own business over here. Like, and I think it's just that constant balance between a level of discipline that will get you the results that you want, and also recognizing the peaks and troughs in your energy to be able to work in a way that's sustainable.
100%. And exactly, I respond to you a lot by saying 100%. I noticed that when we last did one of these catch-ups, but I always agree with you 100%. Not always, but Low energy. And look, it's a funny time that we're recording this, because, and it's so funny because even finding the words to articulate this as I'm about to say it, it's like it shouldn't be something that I struggle to say, but there's so much sort of public shame around hormones and female hormones and the female cycle, and I've never sort of spoken about it beyond with my close friends. But with the cycle, with the female cycle, with the menstrual cycle, the week that we're in at the moment, I've had an absolute shocker. I have literally no energy. I am eating my way around Sydney, like just shoveling any amount of carb or sugar into my face. I just am not operating in a way where I'm at my normal energy levels. And it's so funny because I've had over the last few years a real journey working with doctors and naturopaths, understanding there's a thing called PMDD, which essentially affects 5% of women, but it's like a really extreme version of PMS, and I suffer from that. And so this whole journey of the last few years, it's really taken me, I haven't nailed it at all by this point, but it's taken me so long to just come to terms with the fact that I need to work within a cycle. There are certain times of the month where I will literally be the highest energy. I'll be more productive than 5 usual people put together. And then there will be times of the month where I need to hibernate. And I've literally sat down with my ops manager, Lana, yesterday, because I've had a week of it this week. I've had to shift things out of my diary, which I feel really bad for. I've had to move another podcast recording a couple of days ago, like things that don't sit well with me from a conscientious kind of perspective, but I have to listen to my body. I have to listen to the energy that I have. I spent Monday afternoon taking an afternoon of our wellness day that the team take. And I literally just went into bed and watched Dairy Girls. I was like, I am exhausted. I have to lean into this or I will break myself. And I think that's something that, as I was saying, sorry, I sat down with Lana and she's now managing my diary with me in a way where on those weeks of hibernation, I have to do introverted work. I have to do stuff that is more heads down and more aligned with how I'm going to feel in that time, rather than assuming that every single week I can do extroverted work to the same degree that I could if I was in a different part of my cycle. But it's full on, and it's a funny thing to even speak about, whether it's with, and I'm surrounded by incredible people who I can be open and honest about from a work perspective, but also it's a weird thing to just sort of speak about. With my period, sorry, I'm really tired.
Yeah, because I think there's, there can still be stigmas attached to that. And again, we always want to be seen to be able to hold our own and do our best. And I think it's something that we've both really, I would say maybe over the last 2 years, that we've both really started to lean into in a bit more, with a bit more interest around how much our cycle, how much we need to kind of start mirroring our activities with our cycles, and actually as a woman really honoring that. And I feel like it's something that, again, in my 20s or even my early 30s, I really pushed against, and especially when I started doing training work, because so much of my time is extroverted. Like on the week before my period, I would be absolutely drained, and I would have a full diary of delivery, of standing in front of people and having to be this extroverted, energetic version of myself. And I would be dragging myself out of bed in the morning. And whilst, I think really honoring that, requires like that kind of diary management almost around it. I think there definitely needs to be more space for women to hold themselves with that. Like, you will have weeks of the month that you will literally feel like a superhuman. Like, that's when you should be doing all your cardio if you go to the gym, or all your weights. That's when, you can be putting in place new nutrition habits. That's when you should be socializing. That's when you should be, working on projects that require a lot of like physical energy. And then there are weeks where you really need to lean into, those softer spaces. And a couple of years ago, me and you went on like an online Ayurvedic weekend, and obviously we both have an interest in like Indian philosophy and Ayurveda as part of that, as natural medicine and healing. And part of the Ayurvedic philosophy around women's cycles is if you don't lean into them, it gets harder, or you will have a bad next cycle because you're not honoring the space that your body needs to heal and actually nurture itself. And so the next month you'll create more stress or more load on your body. And I think that was a big turning point for me, to really start honoring this as as a person who has a female cycle, and to actually lean into it and to kind of celebrate it in a way of like, okay, cool, well, this is my down week. Like, what does that look like for me then? Like, does that mean I go to yoga instead? Do I lean in more to my meditation? Do I eat more kind of heavy, nourishing foods? And it is hard, obviously. If I've got something I have to deliver on, it has to be done. Like,
yes.
I can't not work for a week, but I think we can be kinder and smarter around it. And again, I think that plays into the mental health piece, because rather than being like, why can't I? It should be, what should I be doing instead? And I think all of this lends itself to a kinder conversation with self, which is what most of us need, because we spend so much time telling ourselves, why can't you do this? Why haven't you done this? There's a lot. It's like that quote, and I probably said it last time, but if we spoke to other people how we speak to ourselves, we wouldn't have many friends, right? It's exactly that. And what can lead to poor mental health, or is that neural development, creating neural pathways around, I'm not good enough. Like that in itself, and telling yourself every single month, I should be able to do more, when for centuries and centuries women have been honoring their cycles, is madness. It's ludicrous, really. God, I really went off on a rant. I could have kept.
It's so funny as well, because whenever I'm hosting the podcast, I have like a notepad next to me of like, I write down like one word, and then that's my trigger to like take the conversation the next direction. I've written down like 6 things, and I'm like, I don't know where to start.
Like that.
It was such a good rant.
It was just a real purge.
And do you know what? It's like we've never spoken about it in a public forum. I do a lot of LinkedIn posts about mental health and share a lot. I'm quite open and vulnerable to some extent on LinkedIn. And it's just not a topic like, hey guys, let's talk about periods. Like, I've never done that before. And I think even in having this conversation, I know that there's going to be so many people listening, women probably, who, but not, right? Like, it's not for 50% of the population. I think there has to be an understanding and awareness from the other 50% as well. I think that is absolutely crucial. But the one bit, if anyone listening is sort of hearing this and any sort of sparks fly, or they're kind of wondering about it themselves, the biggest thing that has worked for me, and it has been an absolute superpower over the last 2 years, is just being clued into my cycle. I live and die by the Clue app, and I will have kind of moments of going, oh, I feel really good today. I'll check the app. Oh yeah, it's because I'm at this stage of my cycle. Or, oof, that was a low energy day, and I'll click in. Oh yeah, okay, that's because I'm here. And it just, that awareness around your own cycle. And I think so many of us, and I did for so many years, just crack on. And then you get your period and you're like, oh, that makes sense. And I think bridging that gap of having the knowledge and understanding and tracking of your cycle, and then managing your energy around that, has literally been the biggest, and I'm by no means have perfected it, but it has been the biggest life hack. And what you've touched on there about the impact on mental health, because obviously we are speaking about mental health awareness. I think that for me, poor mental health has been a result of everything you were just saying, not pushing up against, not giving into and leaning into the patterns and the cadences of my cycle. Poor mental health has been a result of pushing up against and pulling in the other direction. So for example, in my hibernation week, where my body is screaming, please shut up, stay home, like shush, close the curtains, like go away, clear your diary. And I've gone, no, I've got to do this, and I've got to host this event, and I've got to do this. And I end up layering and layering and layering stuff. And then I end up spiraling, and my mental health struggles because my nervous system's in overdrive. And so I think that having, from a hormonal perspective, from a cycle awareness perspective, having that insight will really help you to put the foundations in place, or the steps in place, to prevent you from getting to that stage. And it all ties in with just women in business, the careers that we have, the trying to do it all. And also just having that understanding and that self-compassion, because that is the trick in my mind. That is the trick to really leaning into the seasons. And I've heard it described as a season. And I think that is such a lovely way to describe it. In summer, there's just no stopping us. In spring, you know, something good is coming. In winter, it's like, eek, like I can't, I need to bed in. Yeah, batten down the hatches, exactly. So it's I do feel very strongly about it, but it's been an absolute journey of a few years to even get to this point. And I've noticed that even this month and in the last few months, in giving into it a little bit more and being like, it is what it is. Why am I fighting against it? It has felt easier.
Yeah. It's hard though. It's hard to do those things for ourselves. And as you were just talking, I was just thinking about, because obviously I haven't been in my cycle for the last few months with being pregnant, right? And your hormones, I mean, that's just a whole nother story.
Like, I was going to say, how's managing that?
Oh my, like, you don't know where you're at and you've never experienced it before, and they're up and then they're down. And but I think what I was thinking about when you were saying that is, it's been so much easier to lean in and soften, knowing that I'm doing that for someone else. You know, like, it hasn't been about me. It's been about her growth, her health, her development. Like, whenever I've had those guilty days of I should have done this, or I shouldn't cancel that, or I can't do that, it's like, no, it's not about me. That's a lot easier when you can make it about someone else. It's really hard to own that when it's about you. Because I always, when, you know, I'm in my cycle, I'm like, am I just being lazy today? Like, am I just being like, and then I'm like, no, like, that you're not a lazy person, Laura. Like, you're allowed to feel low energy and you're allowed to respect that. But it's almost like, it's like when I'm sick, I do the same. How sick am I though? You know, like, second guess it. Like, am I sick? Am I really sick enough that I should cancel my morning? Well, if you're thinking about it, probably, because you cancel like 2 things a year ever. So, but I think it's a lot easier when you can do it for someone else. It's very hard to go, oh, I'm really honoring and respecting this for myself, and I'm not going to be guilty about it. But we need to, and I do, you know, in being as close as we are in the last few months and really leaning into that, like, you definitely, there's a different energy to it. You don't push against it in the same way that you used to. And then I think, you know, not speaking out of turn, but I think your recovery is so much quicker from it, because you're just like, cool, I lent in a little bit more, and it's like, you're not coming out the other side being like, and now I'm depleted.
It's almost like you're in battle with yourself. Like, for me, in the times where I'm pulling against it, my body's like, please, can we just, and I'm like, no, shut up. And like, you're in this battle, this turmoil, absolute mental battle that impacts your mental health. I say it's me. I'm talking about me. I don't know why I'm projecting in that way. This is a common thing, right? We all go through this madness.
I imagine there'd be so many women listening to this being like, oh my God, like, it's me.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, as a topic, something that a lot of us can relate to. But yeah, I do. I've noticed when you do have that level of sort of discourse with it, or that level of just like the pushing up against it, as I said, that level of friction, then afterwards you're exhausted, because it's like, again, I don't know why I'm exhausted, because I've spent the last week in battle with myself. And so, yes, you're right. Recovery then from it is, you lean in, you give your body what it needs. But you know what, even as I say that, what comes into my head is like, the world of work isn't set up for that. I don't think that it's very easy for a lot of successful women in business to be able to say, guys, and I think about the people in my business, I would want to think that we could all be creative enough that we could lean into the bits that it's like, you know what, I would love for any of my team to say, this is not my great week with my cycle. I'm going to focus on my LinkedIn content creation. I'm going to focus on messaging people on LinkedIn rather than making calls. Like, I would be open to that, but I cannot genuinely say that everyone in my business would be comfortable doing that. And that isn't a Lotus issue. It's a systemic, broader women in business issue. And again, I'm not going to go on about the patriarchy, but I do genuinely believe that it's a symptom and a result of the fact that the world of work is made for men. And that's why I think everything that I have spoken about over the last few years, this hybrid remote working, how the world of work is now set up, it is so in support of women. It is in support of people who do the unpaid work, who do the domestic work, who have these cycles that they need to manage. And I'm at risk now of ranting because this is obviously something that is so hugely frustrating. But I think that it's all well and good for us business owners to be able to say, X amount of years in, I'm finally sort of aligning myself with my cycle and I feel like I can lean into it. But the world of work isn't set up so that we can really, really lean into that. And I think that's where the work needs to come. And we have a long way to go. But you can manage it within your own. If there's work things that just can't be shifted or moved, and it's like, that's just my job or whatever, you can socialize less, you can nourish yourself in a different way with food. Like there's other things that you can do to support your hibernation. But I would encourage anyone to speak to their managers, leaders, businesses about sort of managing those cycles as well, because although there's shame and stigma attached to it, it could be the thing that really, really supports your mental health within the workplace.
And isn't that funny that this, I wonder where this will fit into the mental health conversation and whether it will for women, because it's not, there's so much focus now on this, and it's amazing. And hopefully this will be another progression of this recognition that women have these fluctuations in their hormones, which do affect their capacity, or that it's not even ability, it's just where they can put their energy credits in a week or in a month, right? And if we can start to really harness that and recognize that, and I think the conversation, there's a lot of work to do. And I think for a lot of women who maybe are listening to this or have started kind of exploring that, or female business owners, like, we can really champion that. But it's, when we were discussing, like, are we going to talk about this on the podcast, there was that element of like, ooh, like, this is quite a sensitive and personal thing to talk about. And then it's like, even as we're talking about it, I'm like, it shouldn't be. We should be just be talking about this. But even that stigma is still a little bit like, are we going to be comfortable talking about this? And it's like, yes, we should be comfortable talking about this, because it happens every month for every female. Like, why are we not honoring this more? And of course, it has such a massive link to our well-being and our mental health, which is the fundamental conversation that most businesses are having at the moment. How do we support people better with their mental health? Well, this is a big factor for women, so we need to be bringing that into the conversation.
If you put, as you said that, and as you spoke about us even talking about this on the podcast and being sort of open about this, it made me think that if you put 40 people in a room and said, okay, guys, we're going to talk about men and women, we're going to talk about periods, what reaction would that elicit? The women would go, oh, the men would go, oh, like it doesn't, there's a shameful, embarrassing, sort of weird stigma, as we said, around it. So yeah, and I think honestly, there might even be men listening to this who are like, ick, that's a lady one, don't need to be involved in this.
I think I'm done. Like, I think I don't need to. But I think it's because it's the sexualization of it. Like, if we're talking about it from energy management and chemical imbalances, and because, for example, like with ADHD, which most people if they've listened to this before will know that I have ADHD, neurodiverse, like, you're massively affected by your cycle, because when you past ovulation, when you go into your week before, your dopamine naturally drops, and people with ADHD struggle to get enough dopamine anyway, right? So it's a real issue for people with ADHD. They have real fluctuations with PMS, and it is associated with it, right? Now, if I was to talk about that from that perspective, it's all fine, isn't it? But I think it's the sexualization of the menstrual cycle and what it means and what people associate it with that makes it uncomfortable for people to talk about, because people's brains go, menstruation, and are we talking about this in the workplace? People don't go, menstrual cycle, mental health.
No, correct. And also people go, menstrual cycle, ew, blood, can't picture that. Don't make me sick. That's it. Like, that is the reaction that it
Yeah.
elicits from people. And I think, like, yes, that's fascinating about the ADHD, and it is all chemicals, it's hormones, it's chemicals. Like, that's obviously what it is, like, from a scientific perspective. Oh my God, my brain had three thoughts at once there, and it really battled to figure out which path I wanted to go down. And I'll end up on none because they all merge together in one thought. But I think for any men listening, men in business, having an awareness, kindness, and just holding space towards this is absolutely crucial. I have worked with men who I have been able to build trusting, open relationships where I've said, I'm struggling, this is not a good week for me, energy levels are no good, this is what I'm going through, my mental health is impacted because of it, and I need to bow out. It hasn't been that sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It hasn't been that articulate. Sometimes it's just through tears. I can't do this today. And so I think it's amazing that we can have those conversations with men in business, but it absolutely needs to be from both females and from males within the workplace. It has to be something we have an awareness of, because it is so commonplace within the workforce. So yeah, that is definitely something. But as we said before, like, I think it's a superpower to have that sort of intuition around what your cycle is. Like, in the times where you are flying and those couple of weeks that you spoke about, like, that is a superpower, to feel that sort of on top of the world, like everything is in your grasp. The neurodivergence and the cycle, that isn't something that I don't think I knew. As you were saying that, I don't think that is something that I was across, but that's so interesting. That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's something that because you obviously that kind of week before your cycle. So obviously what happens, like, your estrogen drops and PMS kicks in following ovulation, right? Because the estrogen drops and your progesterone increases. Now, what that can do is essentially cause your dopamine to decline. There might be people listening to this that, like, she's got this totally wrong, or the wrong way around, but like,
doctors shushy.
So I took out of this what I remembered. But people with ADHD struggle to get enough dopamine flowing, right? So yeah, that's why and dopamine is responsible for pleasure, but decision making, attention, all of those things that people with ADHD struggle with, right? So they think that the dopamine piece is one of the fundamental, like, if they were to look at the ADHD brain, that's often what is low or missing, which is why the natural ways of working with people with ADHD are things like exercise, meditation, good food, everything that naturally increases your dopamine. But what happens if you have naturally low dopamine, and then obviously you have low dopamine prior to your period, is that you get this double whammy effect. And so a lot of women who have ADHD also suffer from PMDD, because they feel the effects of their period so intensely.
Interesting.
Because of that natural decline in dopamine hitting an already low supply, or low amount of dopamine. So even when I was diagnosed with ADHD, and then understanding that was like, oh, like, you can't, you can do what you can do with this stuff, but you also have to really honor it, like, and it's cruel to fight yourself on this stuff, like, that you actually don't have a huge amount of control over. And that neurodivergent relationship with your hormones is really important to understand as well, because a neurodivergent person will be affected differently by their cycle as well.
That makes so much sense. It's funny, we in our group of friends, we have so many. You'd be hard pushed to find a neurotypical in our group of friends.
Yeah,
we are a
neurodiverse.
A neurodiverse bunch. And we were speaking recently, very recently, about a month ago, with friends who, one just found out she's autistic, another is definitely on the autism spectrum, another is ADHD. You obviously also had an adult ADHD diagnosis. And a good friend of ours who's a psychologist was joking, saying, Sinead, what's your neurodivergence? Like, we need to suss out what yours is. And then she said, and I was joking, and I was also mildly offended that I didn't have some sort of neurodiversity within this group of very interesting people. But she said, I actually think you could be a HSP, which is a highly sensitive person, which is a form of neurodivergence. And I went away from this conversation and I started researching it and doing these online tests. It was very much a self-diagnosis. But I have had, over the last month, the most fascinating discovery in that I am most definitely part of the population who would be considered a highly sensitive person. And essentially what it is that it's an increased sensitivity of the nervous system, which, if I think about all of the issues I've had in my life, it has all been around nervous system management and having my nervous system be overstimulated or over aroused is another term they use. And essentially what a highly sensitive person does is that they have a deeper cognitive sort of processing of stimuli, everything in their environment. And so whether it's social dynamics, whether it's big groups, whether it is sort of loud music and bright lights, is like this really sort of strong sensitivity, but also increased awareness of an intuitive sort of awareness of social stimuli and how people, like you can read the room the moment you walk in, you can tell how everyone's feeling. And as I've discovered this, there's a book by psychologist Elaine Aron called The Highly Sensitive Person. And it's just, I mean, you've been on the journey with me. It's like I'm telling you for the first time, but it's been absolutely fascinating. And I know for me, the research I've done straight away, given I have such problems with my cycle, is I've gone into the neurodivergence, the HSP, and the menstrual cycle, and exactly everything you just said. It is so linked. People who are neurodivergent have a much more increased sensitivity to their monthly cycle. And I think even what you were saying about me the last couple of months and how I've lent into it more, having that awareness and removing the self-flagellation and the self-criticism and acting from a place of self-compassion, and also understanding of, this is you, this is how it is, this is how you respond to it. Again, the counter to this is that there's a gift within that and a superpower that comes with it on the other side. But for now, this is just where we have to be. And that has been the most freeing and liberating discovery, because I'm now able to manage both my life and just life and diary and everything in general, but also this particular time of the month as well. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And having been on this journey with you for the last few weeks, you know, there's no doubt that it absolutely is you, in the way that you respond to so many things, but also in so many of your superpowers as well. Like your ability to walk into a room and just read intricately what's going on, like that level of empathy, like being able to be in a meeting with someone and have that level of intuition to really get under the skin. Like this stuff is all like magic stuff, right? And I was having a conversation with a client the other day, because it's ADHD Awareness Month in October, and I put a post on LinkedIn and he messaged me, and you know, he was saying, you know, I really like to look at, and I have the same mindset around, you know, some of this stuff really being your superpower. And I think it is when, you know, you have these discoveries about yourself, and whether they're these big kind of life affirming kind of discoveries around your neurodivergence potentially, or whether they're just understanding your cycle a little bit more, or going, yeah, you know what, like I am tired in the morning, I'm going to stop getting up so early. Like when you have these discoveries about yourself and you lean into like the less good or positive elements of it, but then also allow yourself to celebrate what, you know, being in that way does allow you to be, you know, that is kind of a liberation of sorts, isn't it? Because, you know, with being a highly sensitive person, like there is a level of understanding of like, I know that we've had conversations over the years where you've gone, why can't I do that like other people can do that? Or why can't I be in that environment like other people can be in that environment and not be exhausted by it? And we've both kind of gone, don't know, like we don't, it's been the one question that we probably haven't been able to answer, and this really answers it. And I think it's being able to lean into that while simultaneously recognizing all of the fabulous elements of what that has also gifted you. Because I think that for so many of us, you know, with our mental health, leaning into the shadows also allows us to celebrate the light, you know. And I think there, with so many people with ADHD, and I'm not, you know, if anyone's listening to this and they've had it, you know, they're having a terrible journey with neurodivergence or anything like that, like I hear you and I feel you, and I'm not saying that there are not elements that I don't struggle with, or that we don't struggle with, or that we don't see other people struggle with, and especially ADHD parents. And, you know, I might also be one of them. So there's that element. But there are so many gifts in that as well. It's just allowing yourself to lean into it. And I think with any greater understanding of self, there comes that softening. And I think that is, I don't know, I found my 30s have just, they're just a constant softening of, you know, understanding and then leaning in and softening a little bit more. And hopefully my 40s and my 50s and, you know, on from there will be the same. But I do think understanding yourself gives you the acceptance, I think. And even in the past few weeks, like the way that you're leaning into your cycle this month is so different, because you have this understanding of yourself, and it's like, cool, I know that this is what I need. And it's really hard to do that if you don't honor that stuff. And it's not like everyone has to have a label. It's just like taking that time to really understand like what your own quirks or needs are, and actually honoring them, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's funny because I think even as you said that, I thought some people also just crack on. They just get on with life. I feel like I have such a deep, and you're the same, such a deep introspection and need to understand everything. And why am I like
Some
that?
people might be listening
like, there's like
to this being like, nice, just get on with it.
Oh, stop. But literally I'm like, maybe that level of self-discovery isn't for everyone, but it certainly is for me. You're exactly right. And I actually was having a conversation, our psychologist friend who diagnosed me and spoke to me first about this whole HSP thing. She and I caught up last week, which is probably a good few weeks after we'd initially had the conversation, and she's going through her own journey as well around she's going through the process of getting her adult autism diagnosis. And she was speaking about her kind of ability to work within the workplace, within the work environment. And she said, I've had so many things that I've been really harsh on myself for, within whether it's how I am in meetings, how I am with a diary, how I am. And she gave the last few weeks of going through this process, I have had so much freedom in just self-kindness, that voice in my head of what is wrong with you? Why aren't you like others? Why can't you just do things that are seemingly easy to other people? And this has been stalking her for almost 40 years. That has been released. And as she was telling me about that, I could fully relate. And I said to her, since we've had this conversation, I have had the same level of release of it just is, and how brilliant, and lean into it. And there's so much goodness and so many gifts that come with that. I was listening to Diary of a CEO this morning, Stephen Bartlett's podcast, and he was interviewing coach Maria Forleo, who is a Canadian sort of life coach, and she's ADHD. And she refers to being ADHD being as being multi-passionate, which I was like, yep, that's a great term for it. But she said she went to see the doctor, went through the ADHD sort of testing, and he said, yep, you're ADHD, you have the gift. And I just thought that was such a lovely way of phrasing it, because I think the world is made for neurotypicals. The world is made for kind of people, the school system, the work kind of setup, the offices, the open plan offices, like it's all made for people who just fit into society. And if you have any sort of, whether it is like me, an overly sensitive nervous system, or whether it is like you, ADHD, or adults going through an autism diagnosis, so much of the world doesn't fit into that. And so there has to be a level of kindness and awareness and softness, as you've described, that supports those who are sort of non-neurotypical. I was like, am I going to get that mixed up? Yes, non-neurotypical. Negative.
Totally. There's an article I got tagged in the other day on that LinkedIn post that I put up around ADHD, and it was like the areas in which ADHD can be your superpower. And you know, I'm very passionate about celebrating my ADHD. It has been a hugely healing journey for me, and there has been a lot of you know, discoveries along the way, and a lot of reconciliation, I guess, around previous behaviors and, you know, things that I was told about myself at school, and, you know, all of that, that sort, and, you know, a level of frustration around, you know, I think it's very different for children now, in a good way, because there's so much more awareness around this stuff. So, you know, it's been an eye-opening journey with a lot of healing, but, you know, I'm in a place with it where I think you can, you know, I really do celebrate it. Like, I know that there are things that I can do in my job and in my life at a level that other neurotypical people can't do it. And I know it's because of being neurodivergent, you know, like hyper focus. Like, the best thing ever, if you're going to be a content developer in any way, shape or form, which a lot of, you know, especially last year or two, been working on a lot of L&D projects. Like, if I get into hyper focus, see you later 5 hours, and an entire training program is built, you know, like there's a lot that I know my brain can do because of this, in a world that is more accepting and set up for people with neurodivergence. That's really exciting, because we really can lean into those superpowers for a lot of people in the neurodivergent spectrum, whether that's autism, ADHD, HSP, you know, then like the world's you know, your oyster, you know, when we start to remove some of these kind of neurotypical boundaries around how to work and how work should be established, and really lean into an individualistic approach, like that's really exciting for businesses to start to explore. And I think we're on the cusp of really starting to see the potential that people can bring to businesses in a really creative way, if we break down some of the barriers that we put around that, or the frameworks that we put around how you should work.
Yeah, 100%. And it's why I think you see a lot of entrepreneurship within people who have ADHD or people who are neurodiverse. And you look at the likes of Richard Branson, obviously comes up again and again, but there's a whole ream of others who have had hugely successful careers, but it's because they've created their own rules. It's because they've thrown out the rule book of how society, business, school, education, whatever is meant to run. Exactly. And they just chuck it out the window and build it as per sort of how they see the world, which is an exciting thing. And even the Recruitment Industry Association, I got an email from them and have signed up to a course that they are doing on how to support autism in the workplace. And I really, when I saw it come through, I really just kind of stared at it for a bit, going, it's amazing that we're here. Like, this is great. Like, it's brilliant that this is being that this is being offered, and that's kind of where we're at. We obviously have a lot of work to do, but it's amazing that that's the stage that we're at, and that it is being sort of I guess brought in that way. And as you're talking about sort of your superpowers and your strengths and the hyper focus, what I've learned, and it's funny talking about this because I really am only a month into learning about this, speaking with our friend who's a psychologist, doing the research. I've read this amazing book, and I mean, naturally, my biggest Gallup strength is input. And so I literally just like require all research, all data. What?
Consume.
Exactly. I consume. My worst trait is it's all of the information I need to consume. No. And I think with that, so it's funny talking about it because it is sort of at those early stages of discovery. So it almost feels like I'm not ready to fully articulate what it all means, but it's been super exciting. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I've taken from it is people who have heightened sensitivity of the nervous system, people who I would sort of say I am, whatever, people I would relate to, people who have this, essentially you end up being so creative because the amount of data coming in, every bit of information that comes in gets archived and gets stored and results in an idea. And I relate to that so much. I have so many ideas in the day, so many things I want to do, which again, tying in with what we spoke about earlier, having the space to do it is obviously crucial rather than just being reactive all day long. So much opportunity to be creative, but then you end up wanting to do each of them. And so I genuinely, if you look at my Trello board now, you'd probably have a heart attack of all of the things that I actually, and I'm aware that I'm at a tipping point of like, that's too many projects, that's too many things to be working on. But I then follow each of them, commit to them, exactly what we were talking about earlier. I want to do them all, so I think I can do them all. Then I get entirely overwhelmed by how much I've committed to. And then I have to sit in a dark room because I'm like, there's too much stimulation. There's too much things in my inbox. There's too many meetings in my diary. There's too many people trying to talk to me. My phone's ringing. My LinkedIn is blown up. Like I can't. And then I need to sit in a dark room. And that's my cycle. It's like the amazing superpower sort of gift that comes with it is then countered by the need to just want to do it all. So that's where boundaries comes in. And I know we've spoken about that.
But also this learning, like you said, is so new for you that this will be the new place where you get to play. You know, like this will be like that. Okay, cool. I know this about myself. I know that this is the pattern. I now know what the reason is for the pattern. Now I get to explore without any guilt. Now I get to explore what this looks like. And I think, like you said, it's just so early on in the piece, but this will be the next phase of your self-discovery in that sense, which like will be super exciting, right? Because you combine that ability to be that creative, come up with that many ideas, and can actually harness the energy to really own in on the ones that are the right ones. But like you're literally, that's, you know, that is another superpower of its own. And you wouldn't have that without that understanding. So it's very, you know, even as we're talking about, you know, it's raw, you know, you're still kind of figuring out how you feel about stuff like this, because it's intense learning something about yourself that you maybe think are your own kind of quirks or whatever, and you might be able to kind of fix them to find out that they're a thing, and that, you know, you've got to learn how to navigate them. It's something that we have to reconcile. And so, but then it's like, okay, cool. Oh my God, I can use this knowledge now to like, just like make so much difference in the way I operate. Yeah.
Our friend with autism, or going through the journey of autism discovery and diagnosis, she said that it's like a missing piece of a puzzle, and it's like the missing piece of a puzzle has finally slotted in. And that really resonated. And I think it's, I'm sure you're the same. We have friends who've gone through adult diagnoses of other sort of ADHD, etc. And I think that's sort of how it feels. I don't know what I was going to say there. I had a thought and it came in and it left my brain.
I think you're right. And I think that's such a nice way to summarize that, because I think for so many neurodiverse people, that's what it feels like. It's like, that's the piece that just wasn't clicking or making sense. And now it does. And I think there's a huge amount of healing in that.
Yeah. And I think for anyone listening, whether they just feel normal, who feels normal in the brain, in fairness, but whether they feel normal in the brain, whether they feel like
normal in the brain.
whether it's mental health, whether it's anxiety, whether it's feeling like energy levels or anything else, hopefully understanding, like the biggest piece of advice I would have is just go into a phase of self-discovery. Just figure out whether it is your cycle, whether it's your hormones, whether it's something bigger like a kind of looking into ADHD or looking into something like that, or whether it is just getting to know your strengths and getting to know what you're good at and then leaning more into that. I think the self-discovery piece for me has literally been the thing that has just led to living a more energized, happy, content, fulfilled life. And I think hopefully that's something that anyone can take on in whatever form they want to, but having that piece where they do understand themselves a little bit more can then lead to self-compassion and kindness, can then lead to just not beating ourselves up in the way that we do, because we bloody love it, don't we?
Yeah. And I agree. I think it's, you know, even it can be as simple as just writing down each day, like, how did I feel today? And just noticing if there's a pattern to that over the course of a month or over the course of a week, or, you know, or just, you know, actually honoring for yourself each morning, like, what do I need today? Like, even in putting pen to paper on, like, what do I need today? Like, one exercise I do is like, after my morning meditation, And then I'm like, what am I grateful for? But then I do what I've introduced over the last few months is like, what are the words I want to embody today? And like this morning, I was just feeling a little bit softer, a bit more sensitive, a bit more tired. And like the words I wanted to embody today were gratitude, love, and kindness. And it's like at any point in my day, if I'm feeling like I'm coming out of sync with those words, that's what I need to draw back into. And some days it's energy, excitement, dynamism, you know, like it, but I think it's just taking a little moment each morning or each night or whatever, and just going, where was I today? Like, how did I feel today? And starting to build, because it doesn't have to be these huge discoveries. It's just starting to get intimate with how do I feel and what do I need in these moments.
Yep. It's intention, and having that intention, we all reactively, blindly roll through our days and stuff happens to us. And I think if you set that intention of really leaning into how you want to feel, it can really impact and change your day. And I think it ties in with mindfulness. It ties in with obviously gratitude. There's so much research. If you look at academic papers, if you actually look into the research, there's so much research that supports that gratitude and mindfulness changes your neural pathways, increases your happy chemicals in the brain, your endorphins. Like there's just so much good that can come, and it impacts your immune system. It impacts your white blood cell count. Being grateful and taking time to be mindful in whether it is kind of what you want for the day or at the end of the day, like it actually changes your brain for the better. Like, can you imagine having this much evidence that this stuff works and heals your body and heals your immunity and impacts your health in a positive way? And yet we still all just kind of crack on in a reactive way. So it's funny, but it does work for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
We have run way over.
As we always do,
which is
for the rest of the day, we just cut the recording and carry on.
I know, it's so nice. Even logging on, it was like
definition of when work isn't work. I was like, what do I have to do this morning? Oh, chat to my bestie. Oh, what a tough morning.
I know. The only difference is that we don't tend to squeeze it in at 10 a.m. in a work day. Usually we both off our phones and running around in meetings, but we have scheduled intentional time for us to have fabulous soul chats. And I'm very grateful to you. Thank you so much. I absolutely loved that conversation. We went deep, but hey ho, we always do.
We always do. And yeah, hopefully if anyone, you know, is listening to this and resonates and you know, get in touch. Like it's important that we have these conversations. And I think off the back of the last conversation we had so many people reach out to us and, you know, share things, and that was really lovely. So yeah, we're always open to that in terms of creating community around this stuff, because it's important, right? And thank you so much for having me.
My absolute pleasure. I've already diagnosed one of my team as a HSP, so if anyone else fancies a diagnosis, I have no clinical background.
Got absolutely no expertise in this. Diagnosed a month ago. Give it a go.
But I'm very passionate. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Thanks.
This podcast is sponsored by Lotus People Recruitment. We are an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency with a genuine human-first and innovative approach. Lotus People are disrupting the recruitment industry by placing quality and service at the heart of all we do. Recruiting roles across HR, talent, business support, and much more. Head to our website today for more information if you are a job seeker or an employer hiring staff. We're at lotuspeople.com.au.